Hey everyone, how's it going? You've had a good conference? All right, so as Michael said, my name is Ashley Williams. You may know me as AG Dubs from the internet. If you read my tweets, all I can say is I'm sorry. But I work at this little company called NPM that you may have heard of. Has anyone in here heard of this thing? Just a couple? Wow, sounds like no one has. But it does turn out that we are a company, and a lot of people are confused about that. So I won't linger too long, but if you do have money, you can give it to us if you're interested. We'll use it to keep the registry running, you know? But at NPM, we have 23 humans working there, and unfortunately, no wombats yet. Our office manager says no pets, but we're working on it. And we call ourselves the Wombat Developers Union. If you've ever wondered what that WDU sticker is all about, it's just the NPM logo upside down. So a lot of people know that I work at NPM, but a lot of people have pretty much no idea what I do there. And the reason is because actually my job is kind of vague, and I don't really even have a job title. So what I usually try and say is, you know, if you don't understand how NPM works, that's my problem. And it turns out that I have a lot of problems. So today, instead of actually explaining to you how NPM works, we're going to do something a little bit different. Now, I have a weird hobby, and it's paint by numbers. I'm super into it. And because the title of this talk and paint by numbers both use the word number, I'm going to be doing a little painting of a story with numbers for you today. So if you aren't interested in me excitedly reading very large numbers, there's going to be some really pretty paint by number pictures in the background for you. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is the number of packages and downloads that we see from the registry. So if you look at the last 28 days, NPM users have installed 18 billion packages. Now, that's just the last 28 days. And to install those 18 billion packages, they needed to do 6 billion downloads. Now, you might be asking, wait, hold on. If you have to install 18 billion packages, why are there only 6 billion downloads? And that's because now around 66% of all of the installs that are happening in the ecosystem are coming from the cache, which is one thing that's making it significantly more efficient for us to run, and it's making it faster for you. Now here's the graph. And in the business world, this graph represents what they call a hockey stick. And I don't know why they call it that. I guess business people just like sports metaphors, but it's clearly an exponential curve. And this is really, really amazing. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they're less into math. I like math. So that's how many installs and downloads we've seen. But now let's talk about packages that have been published. And some of these numbers are super cool. So if we take a look at publishes per week, you can see we went from around 12,500 at the beginning of, I guess, 2015. And last week, there were 39,692 publishes that week. That's basically 40,000 publishes happened just last week, which is pretty amazing. All right, now what about new packages? How fast are these new packages happening? Now we have some amazing spikes there. And what I'll tell you right now is we do have quite a bit of data, and we actually cannot account for what happened there. Maybe a bunch of developers just got real excited. But in the last week, just last week, almost 5,000 brand new packages were published, which is a huge, huge number. Now, new packages are interesting, but I'm kind of less interested in packages, and I'm more interested in people. And the thing that I think is fantastic is around now, we are averaging 160 people publishing their very first anything every week. That's 160 people. So probably by next year, we're going to be seeing 200 people either publishing their very first package or publishing like a new version of something for the very first time. And this is amazing because it's showing epic growth, particularly of beginners in the Node ecosystem, which is something that I feel very, very strongly about. Now, these new developers, these new publishers, are joining the ranks of 102,460 active unique publishers that are already working in the system, which is also amazing. Now, these people are just the publishers, but if you take a look at our rolling 7-day registrations, which is just people who will register on NPM, we are currently looking at 314,582 registered users. And that's a huge number considering that pretty much the only thing you get when you register is the ability to publish. That's it. And people, this number of people still publish, which means that we actually, if you take a look at this one, right, we have about 2/3 of those people that are getting ready to publish their first package, which is extremely, extremely exciting. Now, we were just talking about publishes, so I thought I might take a little moment and talk about unpublishes, since it kind of came up in that opening keynote. So there's been a bit of confusion about this, and when I talk about unpublishes, you might think about this, left pad, or otherwise known as the 11 lines of code that broke the internet. Now, we can argue forever at the bar or whatever later about whether or not it really broke the internet and how long the internet was broken for. But what I can tell you is left pad happened because of naive policies at NPM. Now, we completely understood this, and we were extremely sorry. And by the next week, we had published a brand new unpublished policy. And so this is the blog post that went out that I wrote. And the TLDR is that basically now you can only unpublish your package within 24 hours of publishing it. Now, you might ask, why 24 hours? It turns out that people get a little trigger happy with that publish sometimes. And so you want to sleep on it and then wake up and be like, oh no, I just published all my API keys. It happens. And even though, yes, once they're leaked, it's kind of done forever, people still like taking it down, which is reasonable. Now, what was also awesome about this is when we came up with our new unpublished policy, we didn't want to stop there, because one of the things that LeftPad made us realize is that we are stewards of an extremely elaborate and complex community ecosystem, and that we need to be listening to that ecosystem and what they need so that we can serve them appropriately. So for 2 weeks after that published policy blog post came out, we hosted a forum on GitHub where we solicited stuff from the community. Now, for what it's worth, it did have to be heavily moderated, but we got a lot of amazing things from it. And you can see here we had 115 comments, which was super cool. And not that many downvotes, which was awesome. Yay. But what's great about opening this up to the community is that it actually brought to light something that we hadn't ever thought about, which is that most people who are trying to unpublish packages weren't just unpublishing packages because maybe they had published their API keys or they were desperately angry at someone who might work at NPM. No, what they were doing was they didn't want that package to be listed on their user page anymore. Pretty much they just didn't want to be associated with it. And so from this community forum, we came up with this new process of what we now call dissociate and deprecate, which means that if you don't want your package on the registry anymore, the answer is kind of like, too bad. It's going to stay there. But you are able to then reassign that package to the NPM user, so you can get your name off of that. And then you can then post a deprecation thing saying that the package is no longer maintained. Now, yes, having packages that are deprecated and unmaintained in the registry isn't great, but because that package is still there, it means that all of your NPM installs won't not work. They will continue to work, and that is what's extremely important for the ecosystem. So the TLDR of this is that the registry is immutable. All right, it's not going to change. There's 2 caveats: DMCA takedowns and like really, really epic security violations. But beyond that, and we're held by the US law to those things, the registry is otherwise immutable, which means if you are afraid about another left pad happening, it's not going to happen. Now, you might be like, Ashley, well, it could happen if the entire registry went down, right? If all of NPM went down, then potentially we would have probably the most epic left pad situation in the world. And while everything like that is possible, I also want to mention that the registry is currently extremely, extremely reliable. Now, you may or may not be aware that there's a website called ping.npmjs.com. You can go there right now and see real-time stats for the availability of all of the public services that NPM runs. I've put just a couple up here, including the registry. And so you can see we have basically that 99.9999999 uptime. So things have been really excellent. That's for the registry tarballs, and replicate.npmjs, which we'll talk about in just a bit later. Now, also, just being immutable, reliable, another super awesome thing about the registry is that it's really, really fast. Now, you may be frustrated by the speeds of your NPM installs, but what I'm here to tell you is that since the registry's inception as being this little couch app, It has been separated into a kind of semi-elaborate but very, very efficient set of microservices that have really improved performance. NPM has been using this thing called a follower pattern, and what we've been able to do is shave off a lot of our architecture so that we can serve the vast majority of the data that we need to serve statically and only update that data when we get something from what we call a changes feed. Now, I'm saying the registry is fast, and okay, maybe that's a bit hand-wavy, but I wrote a benchmark to check this out. And so what this benchmark does is it tests installing an application that was about using Angular 2 generator and Express generator. One uses just the deps from NPM, listed in the package.json like usual, with the dep name and the semver range. And then what I did is I went through and I replaced all of those semver ranges with the git URLs and the commits, the commit SHAs to exactly those reasons, those versions that you needed. And then I ran them a bunch of times and averaged it. I ran them about 30 times each. And so what you can see from these numbers is that on an empty cache, downloading your packages from the registry as opposed to GitHub is 75% faster, which is significantly faster. And it's because the registry is specifically designed for serving packages to you, unlike GitHub, which is an excellent service, but not designed for package distribution. It's designed for version control. Now, one of the side things here I'll say is that if you've ever wondered, why should I ever get private NPM packages when I could just use private repos? This is why. If you care about speed. But at last I checked on GitHub, y'all seem to care about speed quite a bit. All right, so all of these things, it being immutable, it being fast, it being reliable, is amazing because the registry is huge. This is a little bit of data that lots of people like to look at, but again, we've got that curve. If you check it out, NPM's registry has more than double the next package registry, which is Maven. All right, and we're up to, I think it's like maybe 369,000 packages if I checked this morning, earlier today. That's a lot of packages, all right? NPM is the largest package registry in the world, which means that we are dealing on a level of scale that we simply haven't encountered before. And it's kind of amazing. And there's a lot of things that we can learn about our ecosystem from looking at this data in NPM. Now, what's fascinating is we're the largest package registry in the world, and yet we can still grow. And so here comes a bit more hand-wavy numbers, but I think that they're pretty fascinating. So InfoQ did a study in 2014 where they ended up reasoning that there were around 18 million developers in the world. And then if you plug that in with the Stack Overflow developer survey from 2016, it would suggest that around 85% of those developers write some sort of JavaScript, which means that if you do the math, there's around 15 million JavaScript developers in the world. Now, there's around 5.7 NPM users and million NPM users, and this number is actually very difficult to come by. Lori, our COO now, has written a fascinating blog post about how you can actually get to this number. But if you take a look at these numbers compared with how many JavaScript developers there are in the world, we're about 50% of all JavaScript developers using NPM. Now that means if you have 2 JavaScript developers at your company, we can pretty much guarantee that one of them is going to be using NPM. Now, that's a lot of developers, but we can do better. What about the other 50%? And so we took a look at some of our customers, and it's like, well, what are people doing with NPM, right? And so fascinatingly enough, all right, it turns out that 80% of the users of NPM are using packages that have dependencies that only are for doing front-end development, all right? And then we took a look, and then around 60% of the people using NPM are using packages that are for server-side development. So that's about 60. Now, if you look at those numbers and you do that math, what this means is that there are 20% of people using NPM that are only using it for front-end code. Now, if you know anything about the history of NPM, NPM was written for people who were writing modules in Node. It wasn't for people writing applications. And it certainly wasn't for people writing client-side JavaScript. And this is kind of interesting because, in fact, NPM is being used for a lot of things that we absolutely could never have anticipated that is going to be used for. And this is really important because I think a lot of the times people tend to be frustrated with NPM because part of the reason is people are using NPM for things that it was just not designed for. And it turns out that if you use something for what it's not designed for, sometimes it doesn't work great. Now, I don't see this as a bad thing. I actually see this as an opportunity because of this amazing problem and this amount of scale and the wealth of value that you find in the registry, the community has been deciding to write their own tools. So Greenkeeper.io is an amazing product. How many people here know Greenkeeper? All right, if you're not using it, you should. It's awesome. But this is going to help you keep your dependencies updated in your applications. NPM-S, if you've ever been mad at search on NPM, these people were frustrated by it, and they were like, I'm going to make a better one. This is an awesome search. They use metrics and all of this. It's fantastic. Yarn is also something that recently came out, and NPM loves it. It's really taking care of a part of our population that we weren't being able to successfully serve. All right, it's for people who are writing front-end applications, and it does a really neat job with that. Now, a lot of people were like, oh, Yarn, isn't that like an existential threat to NPM? But we weren't upset at all. In fact, there's been many clients written for the registry, and they're really awesome. In fact, there's one that's been around for a really long time and is extremely popular, and it's called CNPM, which is the NPM in China. And it's a fantastic client as well. So we really celebrate people building new things on top of NPM. And so I want to leave you with the message that NPM wants you to build cool stuff on top of it. And so I'm going to give you a couple of resources for ways that you can start playing around with the awesome things in the registry and building your own tools to also help you be more effective in your jobs. So one of my favorite things, and this is a pattern that I talked about earlier in regards to the registry architecture, is that you can write a registry follower, which means that as changes happen in the registry, they emit events, and you can follow those and do things based on them. And so this is all the code you read to write a basic follower. It's 22 lines of Node, which is super awesome. One of the very first things I did when I started writing followers is I wrote something that found out all the curse words that people use in their readmes, which ended up being extremely fascinating. You can find that on my GitHub. It's not safe for the presentation. And also something that we're currently working on, this is my job at NPM right now currently, is to document the public API, partially because we're about to start working on an API version 3, which is going to be even faster, and we're particularly excited. Side note, we've started writing a couple things in Rust, so it's getting really fast, which is awesome. So again, if you're looking for docs or you want to ask questions about how the registry works, the issues here are constantly monitored by the registry team at NPM. And so this is an awesome place to get those resources and ask the questions you want. All right, so the final thing is this feed, which I've been talking about a lot, the changes feed. This is brand new. We had another one, and this is a nice new faster version, so replicate.npmjs.com. If you go to this right now, you can just watch in real time all of the changes that are happening to the registry. But when you write a follower, this is what you'll be following. And this is a really cool, awesome resource. So I will leave you with this. We are so excited to see what you build. If you build something awesome out of the registry data, please tell us. We'll blow it up for you, because we really want to encourage people doing that. And finally, update your NPM, please. The version that you get when you download Node is never the most up-to-date one. So just as a small matter of maintenance, please update your NPM. And yeah, so that's kind of the state of the union of NPM right now. Thank you very much.